A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Some focus on the upcoming election in the Northern Territory. Territorians will be off to the polls on the 24th of August. They'll be voting to elect the 25 members of the Legislative Assembly and the next Northern Territory government. Well, the last Northern Territory election was in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. And in that election, the ALP won 14 seats of the 25. The CLP has 7 at present, and there are 4 independents. The current Chief Minister is Eva Lawler, while the Country Liberal Party leader is Leah Finakairo. Let's get our head around the issues. Nick Lay is the Northern Territory Director of the Australian Christian Lobby. He's based in Alice Springs. Nick, welcome along to 2020.
Thanks for having me, Neil. I really appreciate it.
Nick, you're based in Alice Springs. Just bring us up to date. Violence, curfews, race issues. What is this doing for the Northern Territory in the lead up to an election?
Yes, it's certainly a pressing issue that's felt broadly. I note that there were some recent polls that put it as the number one issue for Territorians, and so it is impacting Territorians abroad. And me personally, being from, I've been affected by crime, I guess, more times than I care to count. So it is a big issue for Northern Territorians, and particularly Alice Springs.
And of course, the image of the Northern Territory for the rest of Australia, it must be affecting issues like tourism. People might be having second thoughts about visiting the Territory. That's never a good thing, is it?
No, it's not. And we have seen this, negative media abroad slowing things down here. People are not coming for our tourist season, which is very sad because, on top of the crime stuff, people not economy, and businesses are going broke because of it. So it's really cascading the problems here.
So the election's coming up, 24th of August. You've got escalating crime, high cost of living, the economy in a bit of trouble. How's this affecting the mood, do you think, of people who are preparing to go to the polls with their vote?
Yeah, it is a focal point for Territorians going to the polls, for sure. I think initially, we've been under a Labor government for nearly 2 decades now, and I think the crime and cost of living issues have been causing Labor's numbers to wind back, and we saw at the start of the year the CLP polling quite well among Territorians. Since Eva Lawler, the new Chief Minister as of the new year, take leadership, look, she's definitely at least appeared more tougher on crime and such, and I guess less radical on some of her policy positions. And so I think the Labor government has started to claw back at those numbers a little bit. But I think across the board, Territorians are going to be voting on these things who can sell to the Territorians who will help with the crime crisis, help with tourism, and help with the economy.
So on one level, you've got escalating crime, you've got high cost of living. Let's talk about some of the issues that, as part of the Australian Christian Lobby, you've been getting a focus on, and things like the Anti-Discrimination Act and other things, the babies born alive in an abortion. These are a couple of the issues. Which ones do you think are the biggest social issues that Territorians will be interested in having their say about? So you mentioned a couple of issues there. The anti-discrimination, it was amended in 2022 by the Labor government, and this legislation was a direct attack on Christian schooling and freedom of speech. And the first part of these laws made it illegal for Christian schools to preference hiring Christian teachers
over non-Christian teachers. And this, of course, undermines the role of Christian schooling and their ethos. And the second part of these laws also made it offensive. Made offensive speech laws in public illegal, which is bad news for Christians and for in a public setting, like from a pulpit. And this speech needs to include protected attributes such as age, disability, race, sex, religious belief, etc. There's a big long list. But I guess, Neil, to make it simple, let's say I took a friend to a cafe that I wanted to share the gospel with, and I told him about Jesus, and I told him about my sin. I told him about his sin, and led him to repentance and the forgiveness that comes through the cross. If someone overheard that conversation, because we're in a public setting, they could be offended at that, and they could make an anonymous complaint to the Anti-Discrimination Commission, and I could be found guilty and breaking the law. And so this was a huge attack on freedom of speech and religion. And at the time that this was coming through, the Christian community at Broad really came together against this legislation. But unfortunately, the laws still got through. But this has since prompted the Country Liberal Party here, Robin Lamley, independent member for Araluen, and Mark Turner, independent member for Blaine, to committing to repeal these changes made to the Anti-Discrimination Act if elected in 2024. So, yeah, I thank them for their boldness, and I would love to see that one repealed in the new government.
Would you say, Nick, if you were comparing the Northern Territory to other state laws around Australia, that those sorts of laws around offence, the things that you're overheard talking about at the cafe, would you say that they're actually tougher in the Northern Territory, or is it a little bit like a blasphemy law that you might hear of in other nations? Is it tougher in the Northern Territory than other states, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. It was definitely the first in Australia, kind of the most radical, most crippling of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. It's hard to see the full scope of what these laws bring because they've only just been introduced, they've only law, and so we're yet to see what that looks like and cases brought in this regard. But certainly as it's written, it is concerning and for the average Territorian and as Christians trying to speak the truth of the gospel, which we know, the gospel is offensive and in a regard, Jesus was offensive.
So while these laws have come in under Labor, as you say, you've got some independents. I think you mentioned Robin Lamley and Mark Turner, as well as the CLP, the Country Liberal Party. They're committed to repeal these sorts of anti-discrimination laws. How likely do you think that is going to happen? Is this where Territorians are actually focused?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how the election goes, obviously. If the Country Liberal Party formed government, I'm pretty confident that this would be repealed. I've sat down with most of the current members and candidates, and I know that they're committed to this, committed to this, and as well as the independents. So it really depends who gets in, what the numbers are, whether or not we can see that being repealed. But it is a great commitment from a major party. And I continue to call the Labor government as well and Labor Party to repeal these amendments made to the Anti-Discrimination Act.
It's these laws, they are actually quite bizarre, aren't they? And who'd have thought that this could happen here in Australia? And so commitment to repeal bad laws like that might be something in the minds of listeners in the Northern Territory. Another commitment to repeal issues around the Babies Born Alive bill. What does that look like for the Northern Territory?
Yeah, so, and your listeners may be familiar with this issue. ACL broadly, we're hoping to get legislation like this across the country, federally and in the states. And for the election, I've been talking to a lot of the candidates, members, telling them about this issue, informing them about it. And as we've sent out the questionnaire, we've asked specific questions, particularly around the Babies Born Alive bill, whether or not they would support it and such. And so we've got those responses back. And as mentioned, the Country Liberal Party, Robin Lamley and Mark Turner have all committed to supporting a bill like that. And it's a real answer to prayer. I know that this issue in particular is politically dangerous, particularly for a major party, and I believe that these candidates and the Country Liberal Party have committed to this because they know that it's the right thing to do, and it's not about political gain. So I'm very appreciative for them being bold in making this commitment. And I continue to pray that we will see legislation that protects a baby born alive following a failed abortion.
Nick, usually the Australian Christian Lobby does meet the candidate forums. Have you got some of those coming up, planned in the lead up to the NT election?
We do, so we're hosting election forums in Darwin and in Alice Springs. The one in Alice Springs is still yet to come. It'll be on the 8th of August 2024. So your listeners can go to ntvotes.org.au for more information about that, to get their free tickets. And we've got candidates coming along so that Christians can hear from them and ask questions, so that they can be equipped to make their vote count this election. And on that website we've got heaps of resources to help with that as well.
You mentioned the NT Votes website. This is a place, especially for Territorians, to be able to access good resources. What the Christian Lobby will be pushing as very important, NT Votes. What will people discover if they go onto that website right now?
Yeah, so there's interviews with candidates. So I've been sitting down with candidates running and interviewing them, answers to the questionnaires that we've received back, candidate summaries. There's a video on how to vote, specific electorate scorecards on how people voted. There's a prayer guide so you can pray along at home, and background info to the Anti-Discrimination Act. And there's even a way to find your electorate if you're not really sure where you are. You can just type in your address and find it. So there's heaps of information available, and it's being updated regularly. So for your listeners, please ensure you keep checking it leading up to the election.
Well, Nicholas Lay, it sounds like the Northern Territory is in good hands with you as the director for the Australian Christian Lobby in the Northern Territory. It sounds like you've been working hard. There's lots of good resource there for listeners in the Northern Territory to check out where the Australian Christian Lobby has been putting its efforts and getting a spotlight on the big issues that face the Northern Territory in the lead up to the election that's coming up on the 24th of August. So that website is ntvotes.org.au. ntvotes.org.au. No doubt there's a link too on the usual ACL website, acl.org.au. Nicholas Lay is the Northern Territory Director of the Australian Christian Lobby. He's based in Alice Springs. Nicholas, thanks so much for updating us today on 2020.
Thank you very much, Neil, and God bless you and Vision and your listeners.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.